Well, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump's daughter, gave him a grandchild at the weekend. In fact, on Easter Sunday, he is now a grandfather for the eighth time, and that no doubt cheered him. There's lots of other news to talk about around the presidential campaigns, and to do so, we're joined by Amanda Turkle, senior politics reporter for the Huffington Post. Hello, Amanda.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. And Patrick Basham from the Democracy Institute, the politically independent think tank in Washington. Hello, Patrick. And I'm sure Patrick's there. We'll hear from him in just a moment. Amanda, I wanted to ask you first of all. You know, we've heard a lot about this shooting on Capitol Hill this afternoon. It actually happened at the new visitor center. Could you just describe for us where that visitor center is, relative to the heart of the action, the Capitol Rotunda that we often see in pictures when senators and so on are being interviewed?
Sure. So it's right. It's right in the Capitol. It's downstairs a little bit, and I was actually on Capitol Hill today when this happened. I was there for a different reason. I was actually on the Hill for a dentist appointment, and I heard about the shooting, and so I ran over to the Capitol, and I saw by that point tourists were coming out of the Capitol. They said that the police had told them to get out of the area as quickly as possible. And I talked to tourists, too, who said that some of them heard gunshots, and they said they were incredibly scared. One girl said that it was her 11th birthday, and she started to think about what she was going to do if something happened. They were screaming. People were hiding under tables. And it was, this is the peak of tourism season in Washington, D.C., and so there were just a lot of people there pretty shaken.
Yeah. And tell me, that new visitor center, I mean, it was supposed to be away from all the political action, wasn't it? Or at least somewhat removed from the political action so that you could screen people better.
Right, exactly. And I guess in some way it worked because this happened at the visitor center and not on the floor or in the gallery or anything like that. But it was a way to make everything more secure and also to try to create a more central place for tourists. But Congress is not in session right now, so lawmakers are all back in their home states. Staff is around, but it's pretty light because some of them are back in states, and it was coming off of Easter weekend. So official business, there wasn't a lot going on the Hill, but there were a lot of tourists.
Yeah. Well, I think Patrick's here with us now, too. Hello, Patrick.
Hi, Rod.
Hi, good to have you with us. So we've had another weekend of primaries, mostly in the West. 3 Democratic primaries in Washington, in Alaska, and Hawaii, and big wins there for Bernie Sanders. Have you any thoughts about that, Patrick?
Well, I think it tells us a couple of things. One is that there is life in the Bernie Sanders campaign, and that he is an outside shot for the Democratic nomination, but he does still have a plausible shot at it. I mean, a lot of things, maybe everything has to go his way, and arguably it's more about external influences, what may happen or may not happen to Hillary Clinton down the road, than it is what he can or cannot do that will determine his fate. And also, I think it tells us within the campaign, within the primary contest that they are having, that this breaks down not exclusively, but strikingly along racial lines, that is within the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders does very, very well when the electorate is overwhelmingly, almost exclusively white. Basically, hardcore white liberal Americans love him and his message, or at least they do right now, and they will turn out to vote for him, whether it's a primary or a caucus. And Hillary Clinton does extremely well when the Democratic electorate in any given state, has a sizable number of African Americans. She does not as well, but quite well when there are Latino voters in the mix. And so as we have gone along this far, and as we will go along for another couple of months with the Democrats, I don't see any reason to think that kind of racial breakdown, that racial mix will change. And because minorities are so important numerically, if you're seeking the Democratic nomination, that means that, Hillary Clinton probably will continue on her path to being the
Yeah.
nominee.
Yeah, and all eyes, even now, all eyes seem to be on big states, don't they? On New York and on California. And New York comes before California, doesn't it, Amanda?
Right. New York does come before California, and it's an interesting state. Bernie Sanders was born there, but Hillary Clinton was a senator there. And she has a home there. Her campaign is based in Brooklyn. So it's a state they both really, really want to win. And they both campaigns had press calls with reporters today. And they both said that they're going to be trying very, very hard in New York. The Sanders campaign now is sort of having an interesting line about why they're behind. And they're saying that in the states that Bernie Sanders has lost, they weren't really trying and competing there very much. And they named about 8 states out of 32 that have held primaries or caucuses so far. But that seems like a bit of spin because Bernie Sanders has had events in those states, places like Texas, Virginia. He's visited them. And so it seems right now they're trying to manage expectations a little bit. And they're saying from going forward, we are going to be competing hard in every single state, and we expect to do well, including, as you said, in more diverse states like New York and California and New Jersey.
Yeah. Well, we'll have our eyes, of course, on those states when they come along. It's a bit of a bye week now, isn't it, Amanda? After Easter, people were sort of reforming and waiting for the next push.
It is. I think for reporters, we are really enjoying this week without any primaries. And everyone is looking forward to Wisconsin, which is on Tuesday. And that's going to be very interesting because it's very close on the Democratic side and it's very close on the Republican side between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump.
And are there many delegates in it, Amanda?
I don't have I believe that, there are 96 delegates on the Democratic side, 42 on the Republican side. It's not the biggest state. It's nothing like New York, which has, more than double that. But it's a good state to win, and it's something that, for Bernie Sanders, it would be a nice boost to his campaign to show that he continues to have momentum. And for Hillary Clinton, she'd obviously like to win it to show that, look, Bernie Sanders, he can win those smaller caucus states, which he did over the weekend, but states that have primaries that are a little bit bigger, he can't win. But he has done well in the Midwest in some states, in Minnesota, for example. So right now it's just very, very close on both sides.
Well, let's turn to the strange condition of the Republican Party right now. Patrick, what are you picking up about these waves of, shall we try to stop Trump, or shall we hope that he goes away, or shall we even grudgingly get behind him? I mean, where's the sort of sentiment in the Republican power places at the moment?
In terms of the power places, the majority of the sentiment remains, let's stop this guy somehow any way we can. But there is a growing sentiment in some quarters within the Republican establishment, even though it remains a minority sentiment, that we may simply have to make the best of a bad situation. And so I think that sentiment is likely to grow. As Amanda's been saying, it's a very close race in Wisconsin next week for the Republicans. If Ted Cruz pulls that out, if he does well in future contests, New York comes up in a little bit. That should be Donald Trump's victory. It will be a large victory in terms of delegates. So the arithmetic is hard for Ted Cruz, but that doesn't mean that he cannot pull it off, or that he cannot at least come a very close second and deny Trump a first ballot victory, which is all that the establishment can hope for and all that they want right now. So everything is going to continue to be pushed in that direction. The endorsements that are coming for Cruz from across the Republican Party, the negative ads against Trump, all of this. The problem, though, I think the fundamental problem for the establishment, and the one that they don't seem to have appreciated yet, and if they do, it'll maybe too late, is that they're attacking Trump, the man. And, there's lots of material, obviously, to attack with or, to go at him about. However, the fundamental attraction of Trump to his supporters is not Trump the man. It's what they feel he represents, the fact that he's channeling their anger, the fact that, he has an energy and a passion and a apparent conviction, and he says what he thinks. It's less about what he says than the fact he doesn't seem like a regular politician, because obviously he isn't. And I think until the establishment gets that, they're going to continue to spend a lot of money and fire a lot of bullets and continue to miss their target.
Just on Ted Cruz for a minute, the senator from Texas, Patrick, when it comes to his support, he still seems to have relatively few high-level supporters, although Governor Bush, Jeb Bush, has actually put his name on his placard, hasn't he?
Yes, Ted Cruz has won the coveted Jeb Bush endorsement.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I shouldn't be too facetious about it. I mean, Jeb Bush can bring money to the Cruz campaign, and he does. It does signal, it's not the only or the first signal, maybe the last one, that the establishment is, if not warming to Cruz, then at least getting used to the idea of Cruz being their best hope of stopping Trump. I think the problem for Cruz, or should I say, the reason that Cruz is having a hard time sealing the deal with what we would have called before 2016 the important people in the Republican Party, is that this year is such an anti-establishment year that Trump, the poster boy for the anti-establishment movement in the Republican Party, is only one of two anti-establishment politicians who are doing well, and the other one doing well is Ted Cruz. There is no mainstream establishment candidate who is apparently in with a chance of winning the nomination. So the establishment is in such a bad position because, having made every wrong move on the chessboard for a year or 18 months, they now have a choice, assuming that they actually have some influence over the rest of this process, which is doubtful, between the guy they just cannot imagine being the nominee, that is Donald Trump. Their other choice is a guy that they, a year ago, would have, killed themselves rather than accepted as the nominee of the party, Ted Cruz. It's really, really bad for them. There's no other way of looking at it.
And Amanda, can I ask you about this change.org petition, which has been going around for Cleveland, which is where the Republicans will hold their convention in July. And it says, if I remember rightly, it suggests that somehow delegates should be allowed to carry concealed weapons into the convention hall.
Yes, I have seen that. I think it has more than 25,000 signatures right now. And, I mean, if you've ever been to a political convention, it doesn't seem like the best idea. It's a lot of people. It's very, very chaotic. And I don't, the Republican Party, I think, wants to ensure that there is security. I mean, the thing is like, set aside guns to get into a political convention. Even if you have a pass or you're a reporter, you have to go through multiple security checks, and the security is pretty onerous. So I don't think that they will be allowing guns into an arena filled with thousands of people where there's just complete chaos. You would have, if someone fired a shot, you would have absolutely no idea where it would come from. So, I think some people are probably having fun with this, but I doubt that this will go through.
Yeah, well, that's a great relief to hear you say as much, I must say. It's only one of these kind of outlying issues that somehow has become an issue in the last week. Of course, the other was the National Enquirer story about Ted Cruz, and then the other was a picture of Donald Trump's wife on a rug in her modeling days. These people usually say don't bring the family into it, don't they, Patrick? But the families of both these men have been truly dragged into it.
Yeah, they really have. And I think the risk here is that both campaigns, that is Trump's and Cruz's respective candidacies, they both come off looking bad as a result. When you have two men who are claiming that they are the obvious next leader of the free world, and they appear to be spending a good part of their time throwing mud at each other's families, I can't see how that helps the Republican cause at all. It is interesting, though, in terms of how this came about in the National Enquirer story becoming so big, because it was quite big on social media towards the end of last week, but the sort of mainstream media, print broadcast, really hadn't gone with it at all. And then Ted Cruz decided to basically hold a press conference and announce or denounce the story and blame Donald Trump, at which point it immediately became a front page and top of the news story. It doesn't mean that the story is less or more important than it was before he did that, but I think it demonstrates that Cruz, who's obviously very smart and very knowledgeable, may not have the sort of media savvy that some of his opponents have.
Yeah, well, we don't need to sort of dwell on it, but it is another phenomenon and an unusual and disheartening campaign, if you like, discussions about policy. That said, I mean, Donald Trump's actually been talking a bit about foreign policy, hasn't he? Amanda, you gave another on-the-record interview, this time to the New York Times, and he went into his policies at some length, I understand.
Right. I mean, he's really trying. Donald Trump has no foreign policy experience other than he likes to say that he can sit down and negotiate deals, but that's not really enough. When he was first asked about foreign policy and who he consults, he said himself, because he has a brain and he's smart, and that's one of the worst answers I've ever heard when asked, who do you listen to on foreign policy? Because if you're not a foreign policy expert, the world is a very big place. It's very complex. You need to reach out to people. And he has since released a list of people. They are not, the typical foreign policy establishment. You don't see former secretaries of state and, former national security advisors. It's a bit of a random list, to be honest. And Donald Trump's first foreign policy speech was to AIPAC, which is the big pro-Israel gathering, and quite honestly was largely devoid of substance. He sort of reiterated some talking points, sort of Israel's good, the Iran deal's bad, but there was really very little there to give you an idea of Donald Trump and what he would be like as president, and it was criticized on both the right and the left. And so now he's trying to reach out. He's trying to do these interviews. But foreign policy takes a lot of time to learn. And it's something that many Republican candidates, governors, for example, who don't have a lot of foreign policy experience, have to take a lot of time learning. And so now it seems like maybe Trump is starting to devote himself to this topic a bit, but he's still, it's still not very serious what he's putting out there.
Amanda, thank you very much. And Patrick, have you come across, I think there are two major generals now on his list, but have you actually come across any of the people who he's named as advisors or named as people who are helping him with his campaign?
Yeah, I think the one who's the most prominent in terms of exposure is Professor Walid Fares,
Yes.
who is a Lebanese-American gentleman who has written extensively and taught extensively in America, particularly on counterterrorism, Islamic extremism, that kind of thing. He's quite a prominent talking head here in America. I think I hear everything Amanda's saying, but I think politically, this, at least in the short term, this might not be the sort of poison chalice that I think the conventional wisdom suggests it is for Trump. And I say that because Trump's appeal, in no small part, is that he's saying, look, America's a mess, the world's a mess. We need to do things differently, look at things differently. I'm not a politician, so I will do that. I will approach things differently. That is resonating with not everyone, obviously, but a good slice of at least the Republican electorate and some people who used to vote for the Democrats. I think the way that he's approaching foreign policy, both in terms of building his quote-unquote advisory team, but also some of the things he said, particularly on Russia and things like that, demonstrate for good or for ill that he means what he says and that he's going to approach this differently. So it kind of reinforces this notion of I'm an outsider. I'm not part of the system that is, made a mess of things, he argues. And so I think the people who are drawn to him already are, it may be perverse to some observers, but they're drawn to him. It's reassuring to them that he's not grabbing onto the same old names and the same old ex blah, blah, blahs. Because they view his voters, his supporters view those folks as part of the system and part of thereby inherently part of the problem.
Patrick, thank you very much. Patrick Basham at the Democracy Institute. And before that, we heard Amanda Turkle from the Huffington Post. It's just after 2:30.